What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome. Big special Dynasty Points tonight on this Tuesday for the live, Wednesday and later for the people of podcasts. I'm excited for tonight because it's one of my favorite topics that we are covering tonight. It is Dynasty Startup Strategy. Tons of startups happening across the league. Obviously, it is that time of season. Hell, I'm sure all of us are in a few at the moment. So we are going to hammer down some strategies kind of round table style. We are not going to sit here and say you must do this and you must do that. Instead, we like to think a little critically, give you guys some food for thought. So let's run down what we have in store for today. Talking about drafting for longevity and how that has changed. Obviously, it's changed over time as the player base has changed. We're going to dive into that. We're going to do cost analysis and what that really means. And we are going to explore the details of value because that word gets thrown around constantly and is rarely talked about accurately. So today we're going to dive into a little bit of that. We are doing startup Q&A. This is for your dynasty drafts. If you have startup trades, and anything involving startup, of course we'll welcome all questions, but if you have dynasty startup trades specifically, we are going to make as much time as we can for that to get to as many as we can. And of course, chat has to beat the cheating allegations from last week in 5 for 5. We're coming back with that one. I did not have time to update the graphics, so I'll just tell you that now. And of course, if you're listening to some podcast version, you can only get 5 for 5 on YouTube. You have to go to youtube.com/fantasypoints, click the video, and head to 5 for 5. Gentlemen, we're rocking, we're rolling. It's early. The chat is live. Jacob Sanderson at Jacob Sanderson, Ryan Heath at RyanJ_Heath, and Lucas Gilbert at L Gilbert FF. Chat is here going crazy. As always, D-Walk, Jamie Parag, Ern Marks, Dynasty Dave, Skull, the usual suspects all here lining up early today. I'm fired up. I will say I expect 5 for 5 to be less rigged than the NBA draft. Let's dive in to the first bit for today. Drafting for longevity. This is something that is talked about often, and I'm not going to go first here because I just talked through that intro. I don't want to lose all of us, like all of our listeners, for me just rambling for too long in a row. But I'm promising, this is a tease, I am going to cook here in about 7-ish minutes. So I'm going to pass it off to Jacob first. What do you want to first hit? Because drafting for longevity is the goal, but I feel like a lot of people don't really do it the right way. And Jacob ended up being muted, and
Tom just dropped an absolute grenade at my shoulder here. He's like taking the intro, he's sounding eloquent, he's talking beautifully, and then he's like, and I'm gonna boss it over there.
Yeah, you got to stay ready. We stay ready on this show, and you weren't as you were muted. Yeah,
tough scene for me. Yeah, I think, I don't know. Let's just start up with sort of my overview. I think every startup is different. Like I was trying to think today, like, do I have like an actual defined thing that I try to do in every startup? And the honest answer to that is no. It's like totally left in terms of what the group wants to do. There's things that I don't do. It's like pretty rare that I try to do like an all-in team immediately from the startup. There's versions of all-in that I've done in startups. It's just not usually like a very extreme version. I also don't typically do the like super tank startup, but I've done it before for sure. I think probably if I have one thing that I try to accomplish these days, if I can, and ultimately it always comes down to what the market lets me do and what they don't let me do. I want to try to take advantage of the opportunity to draft multiple untouchable, scarce elite assets in a startup situation, which is very, very, very difficult to do when you're actually trading. I'm going to step on a point that Ryan is going to make later in the show based on our show notes, but there's just so many players that you go into an actual dynasty league today, and almost no matter what position that team is in, even if I think they probably should actually trade away the best player on their team, they'll just tell you, fuck right off. Absolutely not happening on these players. But in the startup, I feel like everybody has kind of a different mindset. They're not attached. They don't have that endowment effect kicking into certain teams that they spent on these players, or they hit on this pick and they're really proud of it. And there's a certain mindset, I think, now that a lot of people think, the smart thing to do in startups is always trade back, always accumulate value. And it can be in depending on the value you get, but there's a lot of people I think go in with that mindset kind of dogmatically. And so I look at it and say, how can I find a way to get 2 or 3 of these guys that down the road, you can't really trade for in the same way. So that's kind of my first thing that I try to do now in each startup opportunity, and just whether that's actually possible comes down to what the prices are, and you kind of navigate it from there.
I think those are great points. Not committing to the bit early is super important. I'll kick it to Ryan, because like you said, you kind of stepped on something that Ryan was going to hit on. So Ryan, let's have you clean that one up.
Yeah, sure. We can go right into that, I suppose. So kind of my thing I'm always trying to keep in mind in startups, just when it comes to like specific players or like archetypes I'm trying to draft, is like, which types of players is it a lot easier to get in the startup than it is to trade for down the road? And as Jacob mentioned, kind of something that factors into this very heavily is something called the endowment effect, which is basically, if I own something, if I possess something, then I'm just naturally going to value it more than if I didn't possess it. Even though it's the same thing, it's a human irrationality, bias, whatever you want to call it. It's absolutely a thing in Dynasty. It's a thing in all fantasy football. It's why it's hard to get trades done generally in fantasy football. So with that in mind, you want to think, okay, what are the types of players that are going to have the biggest endowment effects? So as Jacob said, yes, it's going to be kind of like the elite tier of players, especially in the first 2 or 3 rounds of startups. So with that understood, I think it can make sense to trade up in startups, or at least to position yourself aggressively wherever it is you want to be at the top of the board to draft the guys you really want, right? Because those are not guys that are possible to trade for later generally. Another example of players that usually have a really big endowment effect is like the aging superstars. So like your Christian McCaffreys or your Derrick Henrys, the guys that are going to go score 18 to 20 fantasy points per game this year, but that just everybody kind of in Dynasty is like, okay, these guys are very old. They're getting to the end of their careers. We shouldn't value them as highly as some of the younger running backs. People have that understanding in startups. Nobody is like, oh man, I really want to click Christian McCaffrey in a startup. Like I'm going to really commit to like the all in right now. Let's do it. Click Christian McCaffrey. That doesn't happen as highly as he ends up being valued in leagues, just kind of in practice. Even if it's a team that shouldn't have Christian McCaffrey, a lot of the time the guy's like, he's been on my roster for like 2 years. I feel like no one's giving me what he's worth, or like what I should get. So those types of players are just harder to pry away from people as a league is established. So yeah, as you're in a startup, just be thinking about these things. Like, what are the types of players where this is my best chance to get at them?
Yeah, I've watched teams have Christian McCaffrey on it for the last 2 years that have not finished higher than 9th. It's like, I'm just not trading him if I'm not getting the value he deserves. And I'm just like, all right, brother, I'm happy for you, but enjoy 9th. You're going to end up trading him for even less in a year from now. Like, I don't like, you're totally right with that. And when you talk about not being afraid to trade up, I want to talk about now Scott Barrett and I got into this at the Fantasy Points Discord, which you can get the link to in the description. Dynasty section is completely free, as well as some other channels right now. You can get in there. Him and I got into this a little bit last year. I think that the building a super team era is over. I think the days of trading back round after round after round after round, every time getting first after first after first after first, and then being able to get values on every first, second, and third year wide receiver, hit the Konami code quarterback late, and profit for 6 straight years is over. Because as much as we like to say on the market report that the community, Dynasty as a whole, like, players are still ass. Like, respectfully, you see ass moves get made all the time. Tyreek Hill being traded for 2 mid-thirds. That's ass. Like, so
we're not talking about average separation score.
We are not. That is ass. No, that is ass, not the metric.
Yeah, I watched Kyle Pitts get selected over George Kittle today.
Yeah, so it's no disrespect, but it's like at some point we have to realize that there's never going to be a total balance of the waters lifting all boats. That's not going to be the case in Dynasty, but for the most part, strategy has become more balanced. Everyone would like to trade. How often are you in a startup and someone isn't like, oh, this trade's on the block, looking to trade back? But it's always looking to trade back a few spots, not out. Yeah, we get it. Like, looking to murk someone in the next 4 spots to stay in a tier and get something back. Like, that's the new thing. That used to not be as big of a thing. I looked back at some of my old tweets, Jacob, from like 2021, 2022, and it was like, I've never done a trade back strategy in Dynasty. That was in 2021 or 2022, because I used to be a big trade up guy. Then I stopped doing that, and then I just trade back no matter what. And now, Ryan, you and I are co-managing a startup now, and it's going to lead me to my next point, right? When you want to trade back all the time, you have to realize eventually you're going to start losing value on that, because everyone is trying to trade back. And if not everyone, at least half of your league on average is trying to trade back all the time, because for the most part, people are tapped into ADP. They're tapped into tiers. They have some sort of content they're looking at. I love that you keep subscribing, but please let me get my receivers where I want them. Stop making me take them around, please. Jokes, of course, but kind of not, maybe. But the better half of that, as you say, or as that I would say, is that you need to not be afraid to pivot off of a move. I think that is something that people lose. Ryan, you and I were super aggressive in this startup. We decided we were going to move back into the second round and the third round. We traded our 5th and 6th startup pick, and we traded our 26th first and second to get an extra second and an extra third. And we were like, we're going to get Ladd with this. We're going to end up with Jetta, London, Ladd, McBride, and Hampton. Is going to be awesome. We're going to love life. Everything went to plan until that start of the third turn, when Ladd went 3 spots ahead of ADP. And it crushed us. So we still took Hampton. And then 3 picks later, we said, instead of forcing a pick here, let's trade back again. Like, let's trade back and recover. So what do? We traded back into the 4th. We traded down into the 4th, I should say, and we recovered a 26 second. We pivoted off of what was seen as an aggressive move because the board and the value changed. And not being afraid to do that. Some people will be like, I can't do that. I'll take an L. I'll just take somebody else. When we say you need to stay in motion and stay open to all alternatives, not being afraid to pivot off of a decision is going to free you up from forcing a mistake and ending up actually reaching on someone, because for us, in our opinion, other people already reached, and it left us in a position to reach or run, and we chose run. And now we've recovered some of our assets from earlier. So building a super team, I think, is dead in the terms of how it used to be seen, and not being afraid to pivot post trade up or trade down is, to me, the two new philosophies I will be living by, I think, even more so than my late round quarterbacking. Thoughts?
Yeah. Maybe just a quick thing to tack onto that is I think if you're going to be trading it, like if you're taking this approach of I want to be moving around the board exactly like into my tiers that I want, I do think now, just because of how hyper aware your average dynasty player is of tiers and value and, I want to trade back and get the second or whatever, probably your best shot at doing it is at least like a round ahead of time, before people are really starting to look at these picks and say, this is my tier here. Like, if it's a couple rounds into the future, they're not thinking about that necessarily as hard as they will be when the pick is literally on the clock, right? So I liked what we did, Thomas, because it was like during the first round, like right after our first pick, we make this move to get up into the second and third, because like we know roughly what the startup ADP is going to look like. It wasn't exactly what we expected, but just taking on that little bit of additional risk is kind of what allowed us to get what we felt was a really good value deal, because the people we're trading with aren't sitting there like, I know that this is the tier that they're targeting and I don't want to give them access to this.
If I would just to sum up what a lot of you guys are saying, and kind of what I was saying, I think the biggest thing is just to not be afraid, period. I think ultimately, like I said, I don't go in with like, if I could design my ideal startup plan in a neutral draft, it would be, I want to trade up early and then I want to trade back later. And I kind of want to have this team with an extra pick or two in the first 3 rounds. Kind of don't really need to pick it all in rounds like 4 through 7. And then I just sort of hammer a bunch of picks in like the 8 to 10 range. That's like my ideal world that I want to live in. But if we're talking reality, what happens is I want to go in, I want to try and suss out where I think the inefficiency of the room is. And that could be in any different way. It could be if I'm playing with a bunch of like home leaguers that have never, seen this show, don't subscribe to Thinking About Thinking, don't do any of this stuff. I'm guessing they're probably going to be pretty now oriented. And that's where I am willing to be very extreme. And I will trade back, trade out, grab future firsts, fully take year 1. Happy to do that if that's where the thing goes. I've had drafts where it's totally the opposite and it's a bunch of youth chasers. And I'm very decisive about going, maybe not all in, but closer to all in. I think you just want to try to be, I think the what you don't want to do is just be the person who's kind of sitting there and just making your picks on the clock and, I'm going to keep my first because I don't know what could happen, but I'm not going to trade for any extra firsts. And I'm going to make sure I get my 2 quarterbacks because I don't want to be stuck without it. Like, just to me, it's just don't be afraid. Find out what you think the draft is overvaluing or undervaluing, and then be really, really aggressive and targeting that relentlessly and bet on yourself being right in some capacity. And almost all the startups that I've come away with that I feel I've had the best success with in the leagues, it's been those opportunities where I'm like, I think the room is way too full of this, or way too high on that, or way too reluctant to do this. And I play exploitatively into that, and come away with a very aggressive draft.
Yeah. So one of the things you even mentioned when I did that trade, I just remember I didn't look at Ryan, but I had texted Ryan and I literally just typed, "Do you trust me?" is all I said. I was like, "Do you trust me?" And then I made that deal and Ryan texted me back, goes, "I feel like that's a lot." I was like, "It's not. If you break that deal down into 2 spots, you're getting a 6 and a 2 for a round 3 startup pick and a 5 and a 1 for a round 2 startup pick. Like, that's like a Zay Flowers and a 1 for like Drake London. And that's a 2 and whoever in the 6th, let's say, for Trey McBride. Like, that can be it, so yeah, definitely not being afraid to make those moves. Also not afraid to pivot. Jacob, you hit all that perfectly. Lucas, what do you have to add?
So playing off that a little bit, I think if you're going in with one of those extreme sort of strategies of, you're going all in this year, or you're immediately drafting to be in the rebuild to, set yourself up, 2 or 3 years down the road. I think that you're really hurting yourself, especially in startup seasons, because you're already assigning what players' value is going to be whenever they get there to one extreme of the pendulum. You can't just kind of play with what the ranges and values can be for a particular player to different managers. You've already pigeonholed yourself into that. If the draft ends up not going your way, you can look to start that rebuild after the draft. I think that's whenever it's more valuable. I don't think you want to be doing that as you're in the middle of the draft. And if you're going in and rounds 4 through 5, you start to see some of the higher performing veterans, people who their values can't go up anymore. They have either plateaued or they're on the verge of starting to go down. Then you can start to take advantage of that instead of, you've already pigeonholed yourself into being really aggressive, and then you're wanting to take veterans earlier because you feel like you have to make good on those moves that you've made. I feel like that's what you need to avoid going into these startups, is being on one of those extremes. We all want to draft a good startup team. Every single manager does, whether that's for the extremes of competing now or the extreme of being in the rebuild. Everybody wants to have a good team for what their strategy is going to be. But I just feel like, as I said, if you're going to those extremes, you're really just setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, we don't want to be the ones to sit here and just tell you to, don't walk in with a strategy and let it all flow to you and whatever. That's a really basic, not really an in-depth look at how we're viewing things. It's like, you don't have to take Christian McCaffrey because he's Christian McCaffrey, and you can't fathom him sliding any farther. But you also don't have to look at Christian McCaffrey, who's 2 rounds post ADP, because everyone wants to take who the 111 pick is 3 rounds ahead of ADP. You don't have to let Christian McCaffrey keep falling because he's old, right? There's just different ways to view everything. And let's also keep in mind, before we take our first break and move on to cost analysis, that nobody wins the league at the draft. Your league's you're going to have to make moves. You're going to have to make adjustments. Players are going to get hurt. You are going to make look, I got to tell you, because this is not best ball, like Dynasty Points best ball. It's not what this is. You're going to make really shitty lineup decisions. I don't want to be the one to tell you this. I don't want to hurt your feelings now. You're going to start someone's going to tell you to start your studs. Okay, and some wide receiver 3 is going to score 29 points, and it's going to cost you the week, and it's going to really matter by season's end. I'm sorry to tell you. And then you're going to start him the next week, and guess what? He's going to score 7 points. Then the guy you benched him for is going to score 24. It's just going to happen. What's that? You have 3 quarterbacks. Guess what? You're going to start the wrong one. You are going to start the wrong one at least 6 times. None of that matters come draft time. You're just trying to accumulate the best options that you can at the best prices and setting yourself up for the future. So it's important to remember, if we were to tell you anything moving forward, and hopefully this helps, if there's anything to come from it, it's that right there. It's that you don't need anything right now, like Jacob had said. You don't need your 2 quarterbacks. You don't need that. You're not setting a starting lineup. You don't need to fill your RB2 spot in May. Pump the brakes. Take some values. And what does value mean? Well, guess what? After this break, we're going to talk about it. That's called a segue. I nailed it. Sit tight. We'll be right back. I'll have a good segue. Never ridden on a Segway. Always wanted to. I used to work at a brick warehouse, which is a furniture warehouse. And we were the only warehouse that did not get Segways. Trust me, it would have been awesome. I've done forklift. I was forklift certified. Ladies, I know. Relax. Calm down. It's okay. Married. All right. No Segways, though. So I was a little upset. But be careful out there if you're forklift certified. People go feral over that forklift certification. Speaking about going feral, I'm absolutely feral to talk about the details of value, because this word is tossed around nonstop. Best value. Who's the great value? Only draft for value, trade for value. You know what? That value changes 3 weeks after you make a decision. So let's talk about the details of value. And Ryan, I'm going to let you frame this question. You wrote this question. I love how you framed it. So please lead us in to the cost analysis segment we're going to do right here.
Yeah, so I guess really kind of piggybacking on what we touched on earlier, but yeah, I just want to hear from you guys in startups, like what is like one player or like an archetype of players that basically you found are more attractive in startups than through trades in established leagues. I don't know, we can send it around. It can go to, I don't know. Let's put it to Lucas first.
So whenever I'm looking at players inside of a startup, I think a place where you're starting to see some value is with I'm going to call them the post year 3 wide receivers. The wide receivers where you're not expecting any sort of value increase. They are what they're going to be. And a lot of them are actually really good, but because we're not expecting any sort of like increase in their points scored, they just kind of start to fall lower down. We can even talk about, the nesting doll wide receivers, but I feel like we get to this really, really large tier of wide receivers where the excitement has pushed so many up the board that people are trying to trade to get their guy, the person that they think is going to break out. And some of these other older players just start to slowly work their way down the board. I'm trying to think of a good example this year. I don't have necessarily a good one, but we can look at somebody like Cortland Sutton, who's going in wide receiver 40s right now. Like that's somebody who's going to be extremely productive, and you're getting them in potentially round 9. Talking about maybe even Jaden Reed, a George Pickens, like talking about Pickens because of the trade, his value's all over the place. He's starting to move up too. But these type of wide receivers who are still really productive but are missing some sort of excitement that would put them higher or the chance to really increase their value. I think that's a place where you can really capitalize later on in the drafts, make yourself a really, really deep, productive wide receiver room. And then you're just taking dart throws later on with the running backs. I know Jacob loves to take those later round running backs, the people who are going to start 1 or 2 weeks during the season potentially, or you can just cut them later on for nothing and feel no remorse. But especially me, I don't, just because we were talking, Thomas and I, before the show started, about how emotional I get with a lot of these players. I just get tied to certain people, and a lot of it's because I watch too much college football. And I'm like, oh man, that guy had one awesome game whenever he was a 5th-year senior, and it was just so wonderful. But then you don't have to be taking those wide receivers that are really tough for you to move off of. So yeah, definitely targeting the older wide receivers who are still going to be really productive.
Yeah, I'm gonna pat myself on the back a little bit. I absolutely love hammering those types of wide receivers, even though after drafts, during drafts, it does feel like the Devontae Adams last year ended up being a smash pick for you. Mike Evans, another smash pick. Godwin, again. These are all guys going wide receiver 34 or lower. Ayuk stands out to me this year as 37, like you were talking about, Lucas. You've got, again, Godwin. I mean, Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 52. Always talk Jacoby Myers, wide receiver fit. Like, I love that you mentioned this, because a lot of people are so concerned about taking 4 or 5 straight wide receivers. They don't realize that you've got similar war type players that you can put in those flex spots further down that board, but people are just afraid because of age. It really does freak people out. You don't have to be scared of points. Points are good. It's crazy. You want to win once in a while. Like that, that is still the goal. We do not want to just be stacking picks up for 4 straight years.
I don't know how many startups I have just ruined for myself by refusing to draft players that I just don't think aren't going to increase in value anymore. I've set myself back in, I don't even know how many leagues. There's one offseason I did 4 startups, and that was my strategy, and every single one of them is I want to set myself up to where even if I'm not good this year, I'm drafting players who are going to increase in value no matter what they do, and those teams are adrift. and searching for answers, and I'm having to make painful moves in them because of how much I've set myself back.
One of my favorite.
I mean, a big thing why I don't love picking in that round 4, 5, 6 range as much as I can avoid it is because historically, and way back now, this is basically like right when I launched the site, I have this Market Principles of Dynasty post on the different archetypes of assets, and that's, I think, one of the biggest mistakes that people make in Dynasty is you take a very linear view of asset classes of like, well, older players are going to decline in value and younger players are going to go up in value. Typically, younger players don't actually go up in value if they hit projection. People think that they do. People are like, you're used to playing, I think it's like the Madden generation complex. You're used to playing Madden or 2K, where it's like, if you draft a player that's young and they have kind of the year that you would expect, then you hit progression and their overall goes up 4 points the next year. That's just like how it works in these video games. But in Dynasty, that's not really the case because for the most part, we are already pricing in an expectation of progression on young players. And so typically what we think sometimes happens is if this young player is just as good as they were last year, their value stays the same. And if they get better, then they go up. But usually it's more like if they hit their projection, which is to do a lot better than they just did last year, they go up. And if they stay the same, which is much worse than we actually expect them to do, they start to plummet. And sometimes, that progression is not linear. Sometimes players, obviously, the appeal of young players is sometimes they can far outpace your wildest projection and drastically increase their value. But sometimes they just fall off the face of the earth or they decline a little bit. So typically for me, it's like I want to try and take my big swings on the premium assets at the beginning, and then I want to make a bunch of bets late where I can mix and match either veterans who are in some ways a safe store of value because you know that you're not going to keep that much value. But if you're paying for the lower end, not the Derrick Henrys, the Saquon Barkleys, but the guys we're talking about right now, the Cortland Suttons, the Calvin Ridleys, the James Conner, those are actually very safe picks in the sense that you're purchasing the points and you're basically just paying what they're going to score this year. And then they're going to have less value, but you know that, and you didn't pay very much for it. So you can't really lose that big by drafting a Cortland Sutton. The cost isn't big enough for you to lose that big. And then you can also take a smattering of all of these speculative bets on a bunch of young players who probably will go to zero, but they cost almost zero in the first place. And so if one or two hit, you have this big value accrual. Realistically, on the whole, the only assets that you can actually depend on increasing in value in the aggregate year to year are draft picks and rookies. If you're drafting any player that has already played a game in the NFL, the odds are, not in every case, but the odds are that value is going down. And that is the same when you look at young players as it is when you look at old players. So to me, one of the worst things you can do is play this middle ground where you're not adding extra picks, and you're either just kind of keeping your picks, you're trading back, and you're just drafting like an entire team of these sort of not that productive young players, because the theory of that team is usually, oh, it'll get better. It doesn't usually get better. You usually just kind of have a team that sort of sits in the middle kind of for eternity, and struggles unless you can make some moves. So I would try to, I'm not saying you can't take any of those players, but I would not want to have an entire team of, in this round I took JSN, and the next round I took Garrett Wilson, and then I took Addison, and then I took Flowers. Like if you're spending all of your high value assets on those players, your chances of turning that into production or into value gains just actually aren't that high statistically.
Yeah, I'm so happy we're talking about this tonight. Buck and I briefly talked about this on the Market Report, didn't fully get to expand it. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I sometimes get tired of I don't want that player because he won't gain value. I hate to tell you this, but more often than not, that player gaining value means jack shit to the rest of your league. Because 9 times out of 10, you're always going to value your players way higher than everyone else. So you see the value increase. Everyone else in the league just sees points that they can put on the roster. More often than not, you say that doesn't happen in my league, then this point's not for you. You can just hang out, go get another beverage. We understand that not in your league because your league's too cool, but it's okay. And I just want to be very clear when I say this. It's okay to not give a shit about a value increase and to just keep the player that scores a lot of points. You do not have to trade a player the moment they finally break out. You do not need to trade a player simply because you got him in the late second and now he's worth an early second. This is the Bucky Irving thing from last year that really ticked me off. Sell Bucky Irving now. You can cash in on where you drafted him. Or, and you can hear me out, you can just let an awesome player be awesome and benefit. And you know how you profit? You know how you gain value? You help yourself win. Crazy theory. It's just so crazy, though, that it can work. It's like I got this guy in, at 211, but I feel like I should get that 201 and a 303. So maybe, hopefully, sort of, I can re-roll that into a player as productive as the player that I just shipped away. Blows my mind. It irritates me to no end. Obviously, there are some players whose breakout performance we can be like, yeah, like, what was his name? Fulgham.
Travis Fulgham, baby. I remember.
Yeah, baby.
You could be like,
surprised he hasn't got on 5 for 5 yet.
Yeah, it's just like that means.
I think I tried to guess him at one point and it was wrong. I feel like I guessed him.
Keep an eye out for the Fulgster. I'm sure.
Yeah. So tonight, one of the answers is Fulgham, but that name comes to mind because
not tonight.
You can kind of tell. You could be like, yeah, that production that he's not sticking around. Like you can trade that guy. The 28-year-old Ville Parmigiano from Denver, right? This year, that production, you can get rid of that. Like that's okay. But the Bucky Irving thing from last year, and look where we are. It's just okay to keep the points sometimes, guys. You don't always have to flip for profit because it just puts you at risk of that attempted flip for profit being worth less than the player you traded away. You don't always have to do it. Please relax on that.
I will say I've flipped a lot of people before they even play an NFL game. Like coming out of like training camp, I don't know how many times I took my 4th round Romeo Dubs and got a future second and was just laughing all the way to the bank. That
one worked.
Yes. There are a few people who believed more in Sky more than I did whenever he came out. And I don't know how many times I flipped him for a first and a second after the first stuff coming out of training camp. Like I feel like if you can flip somebody before they play, I'm perfectly okay with doing that. Like what's the harm there if you're already increasing value? But I get what you're saying. If they're scoring points for you and you just want to re-roll to try to, in your best scenario, get somebody who's scoring points like that person is, I'm perfectly fine.
Not just even scoring points, like truly breaking out. And I just want to, Simon, look, I sold Bucky plus a second for Fields plus 3 and cashed that ticket. Not really, because Bucky is more valuable than Justin Fields. Just his value. If you want to turn like sold the ticket for value,
I think he's mocking himself. I don't think he's
okay. All right, I just want to point out. I wanted to mention, but that
this is one we haven't talked about with startups yet. But it popped into my head and I wanted to hit it. Or do you want to go to a break first?
No. Go ahead.
I think one of the reasons, like we keep talking about wanting to be active, and one of the reasons for me is we're talking about all these trades now, especially trades before the season, is just the human element of this whole thing. I think is also a massive key in that you want to be, even if you can't close these deals, I think it's so crucial in a startup, especially if it's with a group of people that you don't already know everybody that's in your draft, to be messaging everybody as much as you possibly can throughout the startup, trying to make trades. First of all, just to see if you can get one, right? Because you don't want to be the person who every time there's a trade that you think is really dumb, drops in the league chat and you weren't even in the mix for it. And you're going, I would have offered more than that. You should have been in the mix trying to offer more than that. But also because then this league is going to get way less active after the startup. And you're going to want to have those built-in relationships with people where you know a little bit about how they think, how they value, who they value, what they value. And just you've had a pleasant conversation with them. And then all of a sudden, in week 4 in the trade deadline, you're maybe the person that they reach out to first because they've already have that working relationship with you. They trust that you're responsive. They trust that you're talkative. all that stuff. So that's another big element to me too, is like you just want to be in the mix as much as possible to have access to trades and to build those relationships.
Yeah, totally right. Don't disagree with anything there. We have some Sean Jeffers mentioned Devon Achane, same thing. Yeah, that was another player that was very much you have to trade him. Remember, he was like, oh, he sat week 1, so sell. I know that was like a big, how many fantasy producers end up, coming after sitting week 1? Well, here you go. Literally their wide receiver 1 on the team. Well, not that year, but last year, right? So it can definitely get you. Ryan, what do you got?
Yeah, I just have been kind of sitting here and listening to all the very smart things you guys are saying, and I'm kind of realizing that what I'm like most taking away from this is really like stuff not to do in startups. So I guess like my only contribution here, maybe to just wrap this in a bow, is to kind of review some of the things I've picked up from what you guys are talking about, which is number 1, do not be passive. Don't be the guy that isn't making any trades, isn't trying to actively improve his position. Yes, it's technically like the most safe thing to do, to hold on to your first no matter what, but also it's the easiest way to get yourself just a middling dynasty roster, right? If you want to stay out of the middle, if you're in the middle, that's going to limit your opportunities to accrue value and make a more valuable team. So yeah, don't do that. The next thing is, and kind of tied together with what you guys have been talking, a couple points, is don't just fixate on, I'm drafting like dynasty assets, like young players. I'm only drafting players with the thought of these are the guys I think can increase in value. You have to build a currently valuable team. You have to build a team that has current value, that can score current points, because guess what? If you don't do that in the startup, then you're stuck trading away futures anyway to try to get productive points onto your roster at some point. So yeah, those are kind of like just tying together what we've been saying. I think that's like a decent, like, I guess that's like decent starter advice for like, it's my first startup. What should I look out for? It's those things. It's you should be aggressive in getting the values you want and being open to drafting different types of player assets.
And one more thing I wanted to piggyback on with what Ryan just said, and it piggybacks in the chat too. Someone in the chat is talking about draft value, trade for need. I think that advice is pretty common these days, and it's obviously good as it reflects the position. But similar, like Ryan said, I think it's a big mistake that people often make, is that they try to have extremely cohesive team coming out of the startup in terms of their asset archetype. So like people either decide, well, I'm going all in, so that means I need to trade my next 2 firsts and get all of these vets, or I'm building a young team. So even though it's the 7th round and the highest player on my board is a 27-year-old, I can't draft them. I can only draft young. You have this whole rest of your offseason in front of you. You have the whole season in front of you to make trades. It's one thing to have a vision for a team, but if there's a tier difference, or if there's a trade that you just think is a clear value win, don't go crazy. Like if you're trying to do a year 1 tank, don't trade your own first. But outside of extreme outliers like that, just take the value that comes. Like, I don't think it actually matters that much to be like, oh, I have this tank team, but I'm sitting there and this older quarterback was clear and away the best value on the board. So just take that player. And then like some quarterback's going to get hurt for some other team in week 4, and you can trade that quarterback then and it'll be fine. Like, I don't think that you have to build this like completely 100% cohesive team with every player being on the same timeline in your startup either. And I think that's another key that I often see people make mistakes doing, where they're like, if I am a this team or I am a that team, just draft the best players.
Yeah,
nobody's gonna like examine your startup roster with a fine-tooth comb after the draft and be like, well, this is where you made a mistake in your theory here, that like this team doesn't tell the exact story that you should in like a DFS lineup or something like that. That's just, it's not something you should worry about. It's whatever gives you the most value, the most flexibility to make moves down the road.
Do you know how fired I would be if anyone at Fantasy Points saw my 2019 startups? I would be so fired. Darwin Thompson was drafted on that team and not in the last round. Like, bad, because the draft is nice and it's fun. But again, as we mentioned earlier, it is not everything. And last thing, I'm going to wrap this up because this kind of happened to me. Be thoughtful of when you join a startup. It is fun to join. Look, there is an epidemic of orphan rosters. Apparently, at the same time every year, there's like a 30% increase in how many people's lives get busy. New things open up around the same time of the year every year. And there's just an insane number of orphan teams all the time. And a big part is because you get excited, it's startup season, and you crush one just to crush one. And it does not go the way you wanted. You end up not liking the team halfway through. And you kind of forget about the team 6 weeks later. And then it's week 1 of the preseason. You're like, I should have made these moves earlier. And then you end up miserable in 2 years and you want out. Not saying that this just happened to me, but, I did this startup when I went on vacation, and I wish I didn't. I don't think I had a terrible draft. But, Ryan, I talked to you about the draft, and I was like, this is a very not me draft. I took Bowers. I took Genty. My wide receiver 1 is, I think, Olave, and then I have Waddle. Like, it was a very weird. I have 3 quarterbacks in the first 7 rounds because they just kept falling. I never draft like that. I feel weird. I don't know how to navigate this team right now. And I did it because I didn't. Well, I had the time, but if I tried to, I think my wife would have. I wouldn't have gotten back on the plane. I'll put it to you that way. If I spent as much time as I needed to making trades and being as active and reading the board. I just got on. When I got tagged, I clicked the button and I called it a day. And I regret that. So yes, the itch is one thing, but be mindful when you're doing that startup. Carve out the time. Yes, there's a clock. Yes, there's this. Really think about your moves, because that is going to be the only way we can combat the epidemic of orphan teams that we are seeing in Dynasty, and especially from the repeat offenders that I see in the same drafts, 2 weeks after they left one of my leagues because their life got busy. So that is how we can combat it. Be more mindful when you're doing a startup, that you can be attentive, because everyone likes the attentive manager. And if it's work, that's one thing, but that's not what I'm talking about in this case. So last thing to wrap it up, Keith, I can't say their names. I will say, though, I do have a list. So I'll say this. The first time I've ever talked about the list on air, so I had to turn my secondary light on. It looked like Casper there for a minute. There is a list, and I'm going to put it out to our listeners first. If there is a player that has left your league after trading all of their picks and you have caught them in another draft afterwards, I have a list of players that I keep that are on my no league zone. They are no longer allowed in any league of mine, and I keep their sleeper handles in a Google Sheet. If you are a commissioner, please start this process for yourself. You will quickly start to weed out. My voice cracked there because I believed in it so much. You will quickly start to weed out the repeat offenders of this. I can say that I have kicked out 4 people just this offseason because I know they are on my list, and I went back and I looked back to see if they were offenders. So keep that in mind. It's open. You can come and talk to me. We'll get into it. But let's start the process of combating some of the orphaning of teams. There's a difference between leaving because you're not having fun or you've lost interest in fantasy in general, whatever the case may be. And sometimes your life does get crazy, but that's not what we're talking about here, and we know that. That being said, we're going to do Q&A. Look at that, Ryan, only roughly 5 minutes later than what you had tabbed on the sheet. That's not
pretty
bad.
Good. Yeah, look at us.
That's pretty good. Efficient. efficient. Happy with the
That's
team.
efficiency.
I just want to point out that Lucas has 100% been called out. Guy bottom right corner pretending to listen but can't stop watching the Nuggets game. Called out, Lucas. And roast beef lips, which hilarious.
I was hoping you would read this one.
Yeah, hilarious, mind you. Totally out of pocket. Lucas just doesn't talk much. If you're new here, so
I wish it were that I had the Nuggets game open. One, you'd be able to like see changes on my screen here if it were that. But I'm in the process of dropping all of my Cordell Patterson shares that I still have on my teams. I've had a really productive day of dropping players. I dropped a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Let's see, who else have I dropped? Ate Darnell Washington, Charlie Jones, Rondell Moore. David Bell's the one that hurt the most, but it was time. So that's why I've been doing is I'm purging myself. I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to grow from our discussions.
I love it. We'll be right back with Dynasty Startup Q&A. That doesn't mean we're not going to answer other questions as well. So sit tight. We'll be right back. I just also want to clarify, people are like, your breaks are so quick. Like, why do you even have them? Like, what do we look? Those are for the podcasts. We can sit here and hammer you with YouTube ads if you want to. That's for podcast stuff. So if you're wondering why it's only 2 seconds for YouTube, that's why. Let's get into some questions because we have a few. And some of these are just comments that we'll end up hitting as well, but let's do that. Skull said, let's go. Made that mix and trade during the draft. Thanks for the advice. Also drafted Giddens and Marks in the late second and late third in a one quarterback. I'm stoked. Shout out to you. Jacob, I'm going to pitch it to you. Let's dive into the questions.
Let's do it.
Starting at We're Zach 37.
Wait. Oh, okay. Yeah, not a startup question. So all good. If you don't want to get to it, we're getting to it. If you're tuning down from Amon-Ra to Ladd McConkey, what would you be looking to add on top of Ladd? I have about an early second in between them in my rankings. So I would probably start by trying to get somewhere in the realm of late first value. And if you can do that somehow creatively in a way that maybe it kind of disguises a little bit, maybe you address another need, maybe you try to address a need that's on the opposing team that has Amon-Ra, that'd be kind of what I'd be trying to look at. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm with you. Just I'd even say like roughly a second. Maybe I'm just way too high on Ladd, honestly. But yeah, it's not like crazy. But yeah, if you're getting up into that late first-ish value, then that's lovely.
If you want to make sure you get this deal done, that's all you got to tell them, is that you'll just take a second, because most people will do that. I think Amon-Ra is just insanely slept on somehow, even though he's just awesome. But I don't think you're not going to be tearing down for too much longer. Like if Ladd comes out hot, they're going to be back to back. So
we have Ladd
for too much.
Or more fantasy points in 2025 than Amon-Ra St. Brown right now in the fantasy points projections, which you can check out on fantasypoints.com.
Like, I think that's crazy, but I'm not a projections guru. We did this whole thing on that here. Ryan and I are not getting into a fight about it again. But I'm in agreement with everyone else. So if we all agree.
To be clear, like when I'm saying, I mean, the thing is, like, I don't wake up in the morning and try to make deals that are neutral, right? So like that's why when I have like, it's the biggest thing that people I think get weird with my rankings. If I have like an early second in between them, then people always love to cite my rankings back to me and they do it whatever is the most convenient, right? So it's like either does that mean I should take an early second to move off of Amon-Ra, or does that mean I should add an early second? It's like it kind of means neither, right? That to me means it's like, in my opinion, an equal trade. So I would like to try to win the trade. It's the way I would view it is like, if you could get a late first value while solving your opponent's needs, that would be a great call. if you could get the early second value in return, but also whatever that second piece is solves a major need for you, then that's a great way to do it, where you get, in my view, neutral value, but you solve a need. Next one up. Last year, running back stayed healthy, had a high WAR as a position group. How does that impact your running back approach in drafts, given the running back track record being as reliable as Bernie Madoff? It doesn't really view how I view the running back position. I think, it's just sort of a classic case of injuries being pretty randomly distributed. I don't think that it means going into this year that wide receivers or running backs are any more or less likely to get injured relative to each other based on kind of a weird result last year. I would love to say that we're living in a world where now people are going to overreact and value running backs really highly, and you should go into wide receivers. I highly doubt that's the case. I think that people outside of it's going to be what it's always going to be. If you're in a home league, they're going to love running backs. If you're in a league with a bunch of Twitter nerds, they're not going to want to draft any running backs. I don't think that it has a major impact on how I'm viewing the position, unfortunately. Any of you guys finding things differently?
Not really. Yeah. Go ahead, Thomas. You'll say something more interesting than what I was.
I was going to say, I've always said kind of the same thing about running backs. We're worried about, well, they stayed healthy this year. They're not this year, or they're not going to next year, and this and that and this and that. There's no, I'll say this. In my mind, there's no such thing as an injury-prone running back. There's no such thing as a healthy running back. All running backs just get hurt at some point. Some more than others, some more often. But last year was one of the most efficient years for running back health ever. Does that mean I think like 8 guys are blowing their ACL and they're all going to lose all their value? No. That doesn't mean I'm overdrafting them to ADP. It doesn't mean I'm pushing them down because, well, this year they're definitely going to get hurt. That's an injury. So I'm not going to push them down 3 rounds. Literally, nothing should change because of what happened last year. Nothing. Because if that were the case, people would not be absolutely mindlessly clicking every wide receiver multiple spots ahead of ADP in every draft, because last year was a very down year for wide receiver scoring. If we factored in stuff like that year to year, we would just not be auto-clicking wide receivers. You can't do one and not do the other, in my opinion. You can't. You absolutely can't. So take that into account. There was the year where quarterback scoring was way down a couple of years ago, and guess what? Didn't change quarterback drafting at all. So we shouldn't do it just because it's running back. Like, I get that they're treated like I was as an orphan, but we shouldn't treat everyone equally. We're just over accounting.
And like, just to address the WAR aspect of this, it actually didn't change their WAR that much. Yes, they were scoring more, but they still have to find separation from themselves. They're more valuable in your flex spot, but you have to find separation from like running backs. So the second most valuable player in fantasy football last year in non-super flex formats was Jamar Chase, because he was amazing. And the only person who beat him was the just completely ridiculous Saquon Barkley. And nobody's going out here is betting on Saquon Barkley to do the exact same thing as he did last season. Like that, I don't think anybody would ever make that bet. I don't think people are making bets that he's going to do 95% of what he did last season. Like, that's kind of nuts. So I think that if people are going to start overreacting, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be looking and treating WAR in a way that it's not really meant to be used. And you should just be looking for the value inside of that position. If people are really just going to be overdrafting because they're wanting to like get the best player at that position, or the misunderstanding and say, oh, just the running back position in general is that much valuable or more valuable, then you're going to have wide receivers who are really productive starting to fall. Take advantage of that because their WAR is going to be just fine as long as they're producing.
Here's the last thing I want to say on this. There are 0 people that are playing in fantasy leagues of any format that are going to fantasypoints.com and seeing the WAR that Lucas provides, or to any comparable metric on any other site, and comparing the WAR for running backs and wide receivers last year and saying, oh, wow, I guess this means I need to change my draft strategy and how I value positions. No, that is not how the market could react in these circumstances. The market reaction you might see is the more, I don't mean to say this like disparagingly, but like the broader, more casual fantasy public, when you're drafting redraft leagues in August, are going to not be thinking about the war of running backs. It's going to be, this guy scored a lot of points last year, or this running back scored a lot of points last year, and they'll get pushed up boards in very specifically those types of leagues. That is the case. I'll write about that probably, and how to take advantage of that a bunch in like August. This is not a thing in dynasty startups that you're doing in May. I can assure you. And yeah, as Lucas said, Jamar Chase was one of the highest WAR players, really the only wide receiver that gave you significant WAR or value over replacement or any way you measure it last year. Yet we don't see wide receiver ADPs in startups moving really at all. And I think that's rational because, just zooming out, very unlikely wide receiver injury year. All the structural advantages the receiver position has over the running back position from a dynasty context still exists. So that's kind of it. Yeah.
I'm actually going to say, you know what it's going to change for me? If somewhere these high producing insane WAR running backs are ever going to get pushed down, you know what's going to change for me? I'm just going to draft more of them, because that means somebody is overdrafting another position. Like, I feel like, especially with how WAR got referenced there, we had Iowa Mike from South Harmon, my boy. They're like WAR gods over there. Basically, if we were actually applying WAR at position to make judgments like this, nobody would touch the tight end after like the top two ever. Like, you just wouldn't get drafted until the 15th round, because even in tight end premium, they're like as valuable as like low end wide receiver too. Like, we wouldn't be overdrafting these guys. It would just be the top two guys and don't touch them. Yet some of these other tight ends have high ADP still. So it's not, I don't think that's actually a real thing. The part that's real is people maybe getting a little too confident in the running back drafting only because of health, right?
This will tie in. I'm going to, there's a question that's not the next one up in the order, but it ties into what I was already going to say to this question, which is, this is from Dynasty Dave, which says, what do you do if everyone hammers young wide receivers early? So kind of the opposite of the last question of what people overreact to running backs. I think there's two almost contradictory elements that I think you have to hold in your head at the same time. And I know that's tough, but one element is that's just what rankings are for, right? You get to decide, in my opinion, how you value the positions against each other when you tier out your rankings. And so if you want to take sort of a stand on, I'm a running back guy, or I'm a wide receiver guy, or whatever, you get to do that by setting your rankings in how you feel and then seeing how those look versus ADP. I can say for myself, I generally rank running backs lower in my rankings than ADP. But sometimes I have gotten into rooms that are very extreme to the point that they value running backs even less than I do. Yeah, and in those rooms, I generally will draft the running backs because I've already made my value judgment in my rankings. So if I get to spots where now I have to draft kind of opposite of how I usually do, because this economy is very different from ADP, there's something to be said for that. However, the countervailing thought to this is Dynasty is not like redraft, or especially not like best ball. You're constantly able to make trades. So when the room is really high on a position group, and especially something like this where it's somewhat ideological, that's telling you valuable information about how this economy is likely to be situated for the rest of the time that you're in this league. So there's an extent to which part of why I tend to be a little low on running back in how I play is because most of the people that I play with are very low on running back.
Yeah.
And so I'm not very willing to spend up on top running backs, because I know in most of my leagues, I have very little issue sending mid to late seconds to get startable running backs whenever I need to. And it's the opposite of that, I'm sure, in several other leagues, where if wide receivers are pushed down the board, it's a lot less advantageous to spend up on those top wide receivers if you can buy other wide receivers way, way, way cheaper. So I think it's a thing to think to yourself. One, I want to exploit certain edges in the room, but also think about picking your spots, because if you're in an economy that really devalues a certain position, you're probably going to be able to acquire that position cheaper for years in that league. And so think about what is the best, most effective way that I can leverage this, what I think is an inefficiency. Is it drafting a bunch of them now in this startup? Is it drafting them in this round? Or am I going to be able to actually more efficiently trade for certain guys at this position group way cheaper than I normally would later? And is that how I want to exploit that edge? I think it's hard to balance those two, and you kind of have to play it by feel.
Yeah, I'm just very much like Dave. I'm very much someone like we talked about it earlier. I'm just not afraid to go against that board. I am not making a decision by reaching just because everybody else is thinking they're making me. I'm not going to do that. I'm confident enough that I can make an adjustment. I will say, to directly answer the question to what do you do if everyone hammers young wide receivers early, be confident. And I know that can be hard for people to do, and I understand that, but be confident that you can avoid those runs and make adjustments later so you can still get the best bang for your buck within your draft. All right. Anyone else? I think we hit that pretty well.
Anyone else? Otherwise, we got more. Okay, I'll stay out of this one. I've talked a lot. The next one is, I know you said startup questions, but I've been offered CeeDee, Lamb, and the 110 for Jalen Hurts and Stefon Diggs. I have McCarthy, Goff, and Lawrence as my other quarterbacks. Obviously, I'm assuming this is a super flex question. Ryan and Lucas, what do you guys think?
Oh, let's see. Okay. I hate engaging with these just because it's very league dependent. So would I think elite quarterbacks who I would consider Hurts one of is not a very easy asset to generally move, right? So that you need to understand that, I think, if you're going to make a trade that is CeeDee Lamb and a late first for Hurts and Diggs, I think that's like a slight value win. But is it a trade that I feel like you absolutely have to take on the value if it's going to make your life harder as a manager to then go and still have to address your needs in terms of you've locked up all this value on your roster at quarterback?
But
and
isn't it the opposite? Sorry, he's been offered Lamb and the 110 for Hurts, so he would still have McCarthy, Goff, and Lawrence left over.
Oh, I read this question completely wrong. Oh, okay.
I wasn't going to reply, but then Ryan started to be a total goof and he can't read, so I had to take charge.
Okay, yeah, no. So if you're getting Lamb in this deal, yeah, I mean, sure, I'll say it from the other side. Then I think you're taking like maybe a slight value loss, but I think that's totally fine if this is what your team is. Like that's within range for me in terms of like you're adding an elite talent in CeeDee Lamb that assumedly fills a need and gets another non-need off your roster. I just said it's hard to move these elite quarterbacks and actually get back like the elite value you would want for them. Yeah, I think I would just do this.
Yeah, I think I'm on the CeeDee Lamb side here. Like if you're able to add that kind of elite piece and you're that deep at quarterback, then go for it. I'd be curious if he can float around some other type of deal for, a Trevor Lawrence or a Jared Goff and see if he can, get somebody who's going to be like a fringe wide receiver one this season, trying to look and see. I'm looking at ADP right now just to see something that's reasonably fair, but, looking at potentially moving a Trevor Lawrence for like a T Higgins, if that's more beneficial to your roster. Now, that's obviously not the trade that you're asking about, but that's a way that I would be looking at to see if you could do something like that. But if that pathway's not open, then I'm okay with moving Hurts and Diggs for CeeDee Lamb in the 110.
I can answer this really fast, just to tack onto it.
Yeah.
We talk about it a lot where players that are people want 3 first, 4 first for, you're just not going to get it. This is the Patrick Mahomes issue a couple years ago. And just an update. I've tried to trade Patrick Mahomes 9 times in 2 days, and everyone has outright rejected no counter. He's not no one's buying him. So there we go with his value. But in terms of Jalen Hurts, like I have Hurts and Lamb in the exact same tier on the Dynasty Points trade tier chart that you can get in the Discord right now for free, and you're just getting a free one. Like that to me is a wonderful bargain. I'm just maybe a psycho that's okay having McCarthy, Goff, and Lawrence as a quarterback. Like to me, that's QB rich.
I'm pumped about that quarterback.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Too.
I could have answered this way faster. I'm breaking my fingers hitting the accept button.
Right. I want CeeDee Lamb in this case so bad, but I just wanted to point out, like, in the startup that I'm in right now, CeeDee Lamb went ahead of Jalen Hurts.
Right.
Like, they're already equal. When you have, it's like, yes, adding that elite quarterback is awesome, and having him is awesome, but like when you're just storing these mid-tier quarterbacks that no one's going to pay up for, because most people have their quarterbacks already, it's just really easy to take the elite wide receiver. Really easy.
Yeah. Sorry for misreading that question and adding 5 minutes of unnecessary analysis.
Next question. We already hit on Dave's ahead of time. Okay. Quick hitter. Pointers specific to auction drafts. Do different build strategies emerge versus snake? Yes. Any advanced nomination strategy aside from best players? I mean, we could do an entire episode just on auction drafts. I'll give 3 really fast off the top of my head.
Good, because I don't do them. So
I also do not play auction. So yeah.
Okay, number 1 is be super. Okay, number one. Create some sort of system that assigns values to players before going in your auction. I guarantee you most people in your league are just going to kind of take the approach of feeling out the draft. And a lot of people, actually, in my opinion, a lot of the time, the best value comes right off the top because a lot of people don't actually have a value system in mind. So they want to see people go off the board, and then they can kind of judge what's a good and bad deal versus the guys that already went off the board. I have a pretty easy way of doing this. If you look at my rankings, I have the base first value system. If you add up all of the dollars available in an auction, whatever your bid system is, it's 200, 500, 1,000, and then you just divide it by the total number of base firsts available in my scoring system, and I actually gave an answer in the mailbag of how many that is. You can just assign a dollar value to that. Now, you don't have to do that with my rankings. If you want to jiggle the rankings up to however you want them, go for it. But that's a way that you could do the dollar system. You could do the same thing from Keep Trade Cut.
That's actually brilliant.
So then you just assign a dollar value to each player, and then you trust your valuation system. So you see early on, if they're going for way higher than you have them valued, then sit it out. If they're going way lower, be really aggressive. That's the first thing. Next thing is, there's a turning point in almost every auction, and part of the reason why it's so important to have a value system going in is that if players are going for too high of a cost early, eventually people are going to be out of money, and there's going to be a bunch of players left over. And if you start to realize that early, then you should wait out that middle portion of the draft and take advantage near the end where you're able to get a bunch of like $8 players for $1. If players are being underbid early, then eventually what's going to happen is people are going to essentially reach a point where they realize, oh shit, I have all this money left over. There's not that many good players left, and players are going to get really overvalued later. So you want to try to read whether the room is undervaluing or overvaluing players, because either you want to make sure that you're rapidly spending your money before everyone realizes there's not enough players left, or you want to be really, really patient and then just scooping a bunch of values at the end. Those would be the 2 big things I would say is have a plan going in with valuations. And then number 2, monitor that middle to late portion of the draft. Are we going to run out of players first as a room, or are we going to run out of money first as a room, and then be really, really aggressive in choosing one of those lanes?
I have one piece of advice to add, but before I do, I just want to say that is a legitimately brilliant methodology in terms of totaling up those base firsts. Hadn't heard that one. I absolutely love it. So credit to where it's due. Friend of mine, John Arrington, Dynasty Coach A, has preached the auction world to me many times, even though I have not step foot inside of it because I know that I would get turned inside out very quickly. He had told me that you should not at any point go into a draft overconfident enough to, I don't need to bid early because I know I'm going to smoke everybody else at the end of the draft. I know who's going to be the best value because guess what? If it's a nomination system, you don't get to choose when your favorite player gets put up for auction and gets running up. Or if Timmy from accounting is going to just jack up the price on you because he's read your rankings or he knows a player that you like or he just likes, he's going to jack up that price because he can't leave that draft without him. Auction is the most unpredictable format in my opinion. So if you go into it like, no, I'm going to pass on like the first 8 guys, I'm going to make a bid, I'm going to absolutely cook these guys later. If you're that overconfident, you're going to fail. You are going to fail, and it's going to be miserable for you. So those would be my pieces of advice. Shout out Dynasty Coach A for that one.
Anyone else on auction question?
Jason Wright said auctions are awesome. I've had a good time in the ones that I've been in.
Love auctions. All right. They want you to, John Alice wants you to do a review of your 2019 startup. Probably not going to happen right now, but maybe one day.
Look, I'll say this. I did see this earlier. John, if you're in the Discord, I will host a Dynasty stage that is just for reviewing my really bad Dynasty startups. If there's enough push for that in the Discord, I'll do that.
Thomas, can we do a review of the very first draft that we were ever in together?
Yeah.
I would love to know what that looks like nowadays. I just remember you trading up for Lamar Jackson at like the 112 and having to give up basically nothing to do it.
Then I got made fun of.
Yeah.
Because he was hurt.
And I declined a trade for that same pick. Yeah, that's the only thing that sticks in my mind from that draft.
John, get enough people in on it on the Discord. The link is in the description if you're not in there now. It is free right now. I will put myself through that pain for all the listeners. Jacob?
All right. Do you guys have a way to donate? Howdy, gentlemen. This is a lovely question. Do you guys have a way to donate to your channel for team review post-rookie draft? Cheers.
I'll say this. Fantasy Points is not, we don't have a ton of donos. We don't have a ton of that kind of thing. But what I can do, you don't have to donate. All you really have to do is just get yourself a free subscription to the website. Obviously, super chats and all that stuff, it's always appreciated. Simon dropped the 5 for his question earlier. Bless. It's amazing. We're here for you guys at all times. What I can say is I have been asked about this more and more, about doing team reviews and sit downs and things like that. We've done them as giveaways and such. Hop into the Discord. Again, link is in the description. I'm going to keep saying that. Hop in. I can say there isn't right now, Pearson, but it is something that I am working towards in the future as part of our Discord service, not a separate donation service. So keep that in mind. Hop in there, like and subscribe, obviously, if you haven't already. Stick with us, and I'll have some announcements on that coming up. All right. Last question.
All right. When do we avoid ADP and get your guy? If you're positive X player won't make it back to you, but it's not a value. I've answered a bunch. Anyone else?
So specifically talking about rookie drafts here, when do you avoid ADP and get your guy? I care a lot about ADP and rookie drafts specifically.
Oh, shocking. That Ryan cares a lot about ADP.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're not. I don't know if we need to get into what you're about to say, but I care about ADP.
What do you think I'm about to say?
You're going to compare me to your least favorite internet commentator to win an argument, Jacob.
Oh, I wasn't actually going to say that, but I'm glad you reminded me. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah. Matt Iglesias always drafts the player with the highest ADP, just like me.
That's true.
But yeah, in rookie draft specifically, I do care about ADP to a decent degree, right? And that's because with the rookie draft, you've just been kind of given this asset. It's developed on your team. It's tangible. It's a thing you can trade for, right? So I don't want to be jumping down a value tier to get my guy if I'm not able to just trade down into that tier, right? That's the first thing I would try to do. If I can't do that, I'm usually sucking it up and I'm drafting a guy at least moderately in that ADP tier who hopefully I also like. I just think drafting like for need or for get your guy in a rookie draft before like it all really flattens out. So this year I would say that's like the late second. Honestly, do whatever you want in a rookie draft after the late second, pretty much. You got my blessing there. But you should not be you should be listening to ADP because ADP generally is going to determine the market value of the player that you're taking and of what you're adding to your team.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect point. I mean, get your guy whenever their tier that they're in, you enter that in draft position. So Ashton Genty's, runaway 101 right now. If you're just dead set that Travis Hunter is going to be amazing or Tet McMillan, fine, draft them at the 102 over Amari and Hampton, move on. I can see a world where you can talk yourself into drafting Cam Ward there. I think that's a really tough pill to swallow. I think that you can make moves to where you can get a quarterback at 102. If that's like the main reason why you're trying to do that, is you want a quarterback, you want the value in Superflex. I think that there's additional means. But once you get into a place where the draft positions within the tier that your favorite players in, then go ahead and make that move.
I'll say this. We talk on this show a lot as if everybody plays portfolio style, where you are in 20, 30. I mean, look, your portfolio could be 10 for all I care. We assume that everyone is playing in just an insane amount of leagues. But I will say in terms like this, if you are in like 3 leagues, 2 leagues, you need Tootin. Like, he's your favorite rookie this year. Someone else likes him. You just need to get that share because you're only in a handful of leagues. That's all you can handle. I am totally fine with him being overdrafted. Don't go nuts. Don't take him at 110 because you don't have a second. Right? Maybe try to make some trades, maybe do a workaround, whatever you can do. But I'm not opposed that if you play in fewer leagues, that I'm not a quote, get your guy. But again, we talk a lot of assuming that everyone is able to get like a 20% roster share. Right. I'm not going to feel as guilty if I'm in limited leagues with limited opportunity and really just want a piece of a fun player.
Yep. Short answer for me is that if your guy is the highest ranked, but he's nowhere close to highest ADP, try to trade back a little bit, get a little bit on top, and then still get your guy. If you can't trade back, then I think it depends. Are you in 1 league? Are you in 6 leagues? Is it your only chance to get your guy? Are you in 60 leagues? I agree with everything everybody else said. Yeah. All right. I think that's a wrap on the
D-Walk Stillbirds. Thanks for the content. Tuesday Night Rocks again. Hey, baby. That's what we're here for. Sweet. Filling the need.
5 for 5?
That is 5 for 5. So for the podcast listeners, that's going to do it for this episode. Much love. Blessed to all of you. Remember to leave a comment on the podcast. That's on Spotify. It really helps boost us. Ratings always, like, we can't tell you how much reviews and ratings help us. It boosts us up algorithms like crazy. Like if you're watching on YouTube and the likes, it all boosts us so much. So we're going to keep asking for them. It's free to do. Hit the follow and subscribe button. It's free to do. But if you've been listening to this podcast, much love to you. And as Mr. Hansen would say, that's an hour and 24 of hashtag analysis. Hopefully you've loved that. Leave a comment and let us know. With that being said, if you want 5 for 5, you got to head over to YouTube. That means everyone on YouTube, oh, baby, get ready. Because it's the best show in fantasy football going today. And I have a few statements to make about it. Sit tight. We'll be right back. First off, I did not have time today to make a new graphic with the chat added onto it, even though they won. And it's not because I have questions about the authenticity of the victory, because it's been a little sketch that we're not even making it. We're not even making it to like the last clue or the second last clue because chat just nails it. So
you guys are nailing them earlier too. I just started making
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Because I didn't want to write 5
all the time.
So I started making 3 clues so that I would make sure you guys were guessing it by number 3 the last couple of weeks.
I gotta point it out.
So do you come up with one on the fly then if we're too stupid to guess through the first
last
week?
week I
see
totally
Jacob Deer and headlights.
No,
day.
the real answer is last week I totally forgot to make a 5 for 5 until like 2 minutes before we went live on the air. So I only did like 2 or 3 clues for each. And I was just having a lot of faith that you guys in the chat would lock in, and you guys absolutely did. I had more time today, I remembered. So I have 5 clues ready to go. So we'll see if we get there.
So I will say I am in the lead, the most wins so far, with Lucas and Ryan each having one. Chat has one.
We have the chat on the graphic.
Not as I just said, I didn't have time to make that because I want to make it creative. I want to be lame. Shout out for Jacob for not listening to my beginning to that portion.
I was pulling up my 5 for 5 sheet.
He's probably tweeting about
I had to pull up the answers.
The Celtics and Tatum or something else. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought that up. That was a low blow.
I apologize. Why would you do that?
That's my fault.
Tom starts at -2.
I was about to say.
Ryan starts at +100 based on our comments.
So we can.
I get Boston sports fan pity tonight. Yes, let's go.
Alan said Rip Tatum. Chad also starts at +100. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah. My bad. That was a bit of a low blow. That's on me. But let's just remind we're here to have a good time, right? Let's keep this above board and play along with us.
All right. Speaking of Jason Tatum. The most important person in my life.
Rude, but okay.
It's been a tough time for anyone who roots for any Boston sports team. And so in honor of Mr. Tatum, I want to respect Boston's contribution to the NFL world.
Oh, this is going to be all Patriots.
All 5 players in today's 5 for 5 played at some point for the New England Patriots.
Oh, so this is Ryan.
God. And I'm still gonna lose.
My favorite 5 for 5 tradition is just to make Ryan look like a moron with Patriots clues. That's like my absolute favorite thing. So it's like it's a double-edged sword for Ryan. He should have an advantage, but it looks really embarrassing when he inevitably fails. All right. Here we go.
Okay, I hang on. I just need to say before you say a clue, I still have the chat open. I love the preemptive Land Larison guess from Sauceton.
Yeah,
there. I'm
great
closing
job.
the chat now. Not looking at the chat.
We minimize the chat.
Yeah, I did think about doing 5 players that all had a torn Achilles, but that was just too soon. I thought about it briefly.
That's honestly where I thought you were going. That's
brutal.
I did think about it.
Rear-ending injuries.
It was just too soon. Yeah, too soon.
All
right, here we go. If anybody gets this one in the first 2 clues, shout out to you guys. Or I have serious questions. All right. This player's first NFL pass attempt was a 44-yard touchdown versus the Indianapolis Colts.
No clue.
No, that's too vague.
All right. Anyone? All right. I'm not seeing anything right in the chat either. We're going to go to clue number 2. Everybody's passing. All right. This player was number 2 on the quarterback depth chart in Tom Brady's first NFL season.
Oh, man.
Hold on. His first season? That is a trick question. Because
it's not a trick question. It just means what it means. It was Tom Brady's first season, and this guy was second. The chat got it on too many guesses, but we are getting some red flag Pop it up for me that the chat has already got this. They took too many guesses to get there, so it's going to carry over to the next clue. But we do have a correct guess from the chat registered. All right.
There ain't no way.
All right.
But
Here's
no.
one. Tom, this one, if anyone's going to get this, you have the best chance here. This player played for 10 or more teams between the Canadian Football League, the Arena Football League, and NFL Europe, including the Toronto Argonauts, Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Saskatchewan Roughriders, and Calgary Stampeders.
Oh my God.
All right, I'm going to guess T.
Argonaut-
Martin before Thomas
No,
gets
no,
in, just
no.
to
It's a
save
good guess.
something.
It's a good guess,
This
but that's
is
incorrect.
Toronto Argonaut legend, Mike Bishop.
That's correct. Tom gets it. Shout out Hal and Maxwell, who did get this once again. But the chat blew too many guesses.
You
before
gave
he got
me too much with the CFL. There's only one guy. Now, Mike Bishop led a phenomenal 20-point comeback versus the Winnipeg Blue Bombers that I remember vividly because I was there.
as well.
He was an absolute legend, and he was there at a time with Mike Pinball Clemens that was just bliss for the Toronto Argonauts.
I love Mike Bishop, one of my favorites. Watched him play live many, many times. Tom Brady said he was one of the most talented athletes he ever played with.
Yeah.
It was a real thing in
look him up now.
2000, by the way, that there were people clamoring for Mike Bishop to start instead of Drew Bledsoe, and they were right about a year later just with the wrong backup quarterback. All right, 3 points for Tom. This next player played all 15 NFL years with the New England Patriots.
Okay.
Yeah. Next clue.
No one wants to guess a long tenured career Patriot?
No.
All right. Okay. This player's most famous moment came with a key forced fumble in the 2006 AFC divisional game against the Chargers' Marlon McCree.
Oh,
And this is a
God.
fantasy relevant player?
No.
Yeah.
I don't like how you said that.
Oh,
Chat's
God.
got this. Chat's got this, and I'm not calling bull because I would have gotten this clue in a point.
Yeah.
1 second.
I think I know the player. I don't know his name, though.
Anyone? Going
If he had to
once?
force a
3,
fumble,
2, 1.
I don't know. Give me Kevin Falk.
All right. Shout out John Atlas. Troy Brown is the correct answer.
Oh, not the
Famously
player I was
against the
thinking.
He
Chargers,
played
Tom
corner.
Brady. No, he didn't. He did a little bit, but Tom Brady threw an interception, and then as the interception was being returned, Troy Brown stripped the defensive back, and then they got the fumble recovery, and then they went on to the game with the goal.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I tried
wasn't
to go running back.
Okay, chat.
One of the most
I have to
famous
defend
plays in
myself.
Patriots
I have to
history.
defend myself from the chat right now. Guys, I do not know shit about the Patriots teams pre 2013. I was barely alive. Screw you guys. I have not reached the point of depression in my life where I have spent a weekend sitting down and watching the documentary of the Patriots dynasty and all of the ins and outs and ups and downs from 2001 through 2012. I just haven't found a point in my life where I'm I need to sit and do this yet. Maybe I need to stop embarrassing myself on 5 for 5, just so that I can pretend to have one base of knowledge here in NFL trivia. But I'm not there, guys. It hasn't happened. I've obsessed enough about fantasy football since 2014-ish. I feel like a loser, but by doing it more, I'm gonna be honest.
Right.
The weekly crash out.
Absolute tilt already. We are 2 questions in.
The weekly 5 for 5 Ryan crash out is undefeated
All right.
and justified.
We got 4 points for the chat. We got 3 points for Tom, and we got Ryan in an absolute health episode. All right. Next one. This player had 3 touchdowns in his first game with the New England Patriots.
Oh my God, I know who it is.
Jonas Gray had 4, I thought, but I'll say Jonas Gray.
incorrect, and correct that he had 4.
Yep.
I don't know if that was like a or not. Chat's already on the board. That
was a flex to chat that I do know old Patriots play or random Patriots players.
So if we don't get it right now,
nailed, and this is not even a Googleable clue. So yeah, you guys got to get it.
Oh.
In his first
I remember
game,
this because I drafted him everywhere, and I won't say more. But
wow!
I'll say this. I will say this. I know it's one of these like most obscure running backs like ever. Like it was in the Bill Belichick running backs don't matter era. And I know he's Caucasian. He's probably a fullback or like some H-back that somehow scored. I have no actual guess on this.
I'm going to say Shane Vereen.
Incorrect.
He's not Caucasian, but...
All right. Tom, you got anyone?
No, I have no idea.
All right. Wrong player, Lucas, but right school. Mike Gillislee had 15 for 45 and 3 against the Kansas City Chiefs. Week 1 on Thursday Night Football. First game of the regular season.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brutal.
All right. Chat is once again in a lead here. We got 8 points for the chat. We got 3 points for Tom. We've got none for Lucas or Ryan. All right. This player was a Super Bowl MVP.
Deion Branch?
Correct for 5 points.
Thank you.
Damn, I way overthought that. I was like, who was a Super Bowl MVP for a different team? Because like Jacob would probably make this a trick. Yeah, I was like,
I thought so for the record, James White should have won it in the 28-3. It should have been James White. He didn't get it. Other than Tom Brady, he's the only other guy that I could remember winning an MVP. Is Deion Branch.
All right.
The GOAT.
8 points for Tom. 8 points for John. I will note, Hallen once again nailed Branch. Although I wouldn't have given it to him because it's 3 guesses total, but you can't use all. He guessed Edelman first, so he would have been forced over to the next round on Branch anyway. But you get in the first round regardless. So 8 points for Tom. 8 points for the chat. None for the other 2. It's a 2-way battle, but anybody can take it in this round because we've got the double points. Anybody can win it right away if they get it on the first clue here. All right. This player was part of the Super Bowl championship team in Super Bowl 51 and had 5 fourth-quarter catches.
I have to do Super Bowl numbers in my head.
Definitively in Ryan's age range, so you do
not
get to use
and now I have to figure out which one it is.
In the fourth quarter, James White.
That is incorrect. I mean, he might have gotten 5, but that's not the player.
Is it Chris Hogan?
That is also incorrect.
I'm literally. Which one was 51? Oh God, was it the Ram? Was that Rams or Eagles? No, I don't know what Super Bowl we're even on right now.
Can we get a countdown or a timer?
I feel horrible.
3.
Say the clue again. It's 5 catches in the fourth quarter.
5 fourth quarter catches in Super Bowl 51. 5, 4, 3. 2, 1. All right, we got nothing. Okay. This player's name is just a few letters away from resembling a popular 2000 through 2006 television show.
Popular with who?
Popular. I guarantee you all 3 of you have heard of the television show.
Oh my! I know who it is. Oh my God, me.
So we have to wait on Brian because he does have first crack.
I know it.
Yeah, Ryan gets first crack. If he gets it wrong, then Lucas and Tom get a chance. Ryan, I'm gonna give you a 10 countdown here.
Okay. This doesn't.
I will repeat the question for the chat's benefit. It's this player's name.
I know
is
it.
Just a few letters away from a 2000 to 2006 television show. All right, Ryan, we got
it
5.
doesn't fit, but I'm just going to say Jacoby Myers. I don't know.
Incorrect.
Malcolm
All right,
Mitchell.
it's open. That's correct, Tom. You are the 5 for 5 champion.
It's Malcolm in the middle, guys.
Yes, that makes so much sense.
Oh, okay.
That's
I
Malcolm
get
Mitchell.
it. I get it.
Yeah.
Best game of his career because everyone was covering everyone else. He made one of the most insane catches for that team in that game.
That was the Falcons Super Bowl, by the way. That's the 28-3.
That's why
you
I
should have
said
been able to figure out by 5 catches in the fourth quarter. What other?
That's
Super
why
Bowl
I
the
said
Patriots
James
throwing
White.
So much.
That's
to get?
true. Yeah, the other ones were not those game scripts. Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah, like, you're
that
saying the
is-
Rams. I was like, I don't think they threw 5 passes in the
Yeah.
Rams Super Bowl.
That's why.
They were just the Rams Super Bowl was just James
I'm
Devlin
checking.
fucking blocking people from the fullback
Yeah.
position. For
I'm checking.
For some
chat.
reason, I had it in my head that the
Right.
Falcons one was before number 50, but yeah, that
I
was just
see.
totally wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, there couldn't have been a better clue for me than Malcolm in the Middle because that show is just so good. Yeah, I knew the Super Bowl, which is why I said James White because again he should have been the MVP, but James White did a lot of damage in overtime. So like that's what crossed me up. But he gave me Malcolm in the Middle, and I knew who it was right away.
Yeah, I will shout out MTM Revolt would have got it on the first clue. He just couldn't think of the name. He typed Georgia wide receiver with blown knees.
Yeah.
So he gave the rest of the chat an assist. They couldn't piece the wretch together. But obviously I was not going to be like MTM Revolt is 80% correct, but he was 80% correct. He just could not get the name.
Kellen Winslow, like that's interesting. Hey, shout out to you guys. As always, victory speech. Shout out to my agent. Shout out to my numerous years of just, absorbing data with my autistic superpowers. But that was one of my favorite 5 for 5s as of recent. I really had to dig deep in that one. Gillisley, that is a name I don't remember at all. So shout out.
Yeah, he had like a 4th round redraft ADP, and I did draft him everywhere that year.
Yeah, I was big on Gillisley. One of the other fun Gillisley stats that we didn't get to, he averaged over 5 yards a carry in both the seasons with Buffalo, and he never averaged 4 yards per carry in any other season.
Really?
Yeah, we also had a lot of name clues. I'm glad I got to the Malcolm in the Middle clue. We had for Dion Branch, we had his last name is a noun, often preceded by olive or succeeded by out.
Oh, nice. Okay, I like that.
We had chess clues for Michael Bishop if we needed to.
I like that.
A lot of options.
Let's just be honest. I got saved by a Toronto Argonaut, which is so obscure, and then I got saved by one of my favorite mid 2000s sitcoms. Only reason I'm here. Like, let's really dive into it. Chat, you guys are awesome. This show is awesome. I love doing this show. It is what I look forward to every single week. That and Market Report. Helen Maxwell says escaped again. It's because you talk shit to me on Twitter today about beating me, and now I get to pull those receipts, so don't delete them. Already got them saved. Anyway,
that was the highlight of my day. Was watching the Helen Maxwell, Tom Tipple Twitter beefing in anticipation. That was awesome.
Yeah, man. 5 for 5 is becoming more and more attempted to be duplicated, but it never can. It's the best game in fantasy football. With that being said, enjoy your startups. Hopefully we gave you some food for thought. Let us know. Join the Discord. Again, all the likes and subscribes are free. It's all we can really ask for. Without you guys, there's no show. We keep growing. Look, I talked last week about how we hit record after record 3 months in a row. We are on pace to more than double our last month's downloads and views across all platforms. We wouldn't be here without you guys, and the continued support is crazy. We love you. Thanks for hanging with us again for another Dynasty Points. Not 2.5 hours, 1 hour and 44. God, you gotta love that. The interaction is great. You guys are awesome. I win again. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose, and that your best days, well, goddamn, they're always spent tilting. Good night, everybody.
What?
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.